remember the day I graduated from law school, and I was walking across that very parking lot. It was an April day. It was kind of cold, and I looked up, and Mount Timpanogos was there in all of its glory, and that was 1977. So I was in the second law school class over here at the BYU Law School, and fond memories of BYU, and go back to the days of Kresimer Chosic. Who's ever heard of Kresimer Chosic in this room? Oh my gosh! Who's heard of Danny Ainge? Okay, well, before Danny Ainge, there was Kresimer Chosic. In fact, his jersey still hangs up in the Marriott Center. He was the greatest basketball player in the history of BYU up until the time Ainge came, I think in the early 80s. Chosic was a first-team All-American, 7 feet tall, and he was a point guard. A point guard for the BYU Cougars. It was crazy. He could do miraculous things. Before Magic Johnson came along at 6'8", Chosic could have played in the NBA. When he graduated, along with me, circa 1970-71, he decided to go back to his native homeland, the Czech Republic. I'm just sitting here waxing philosophical with you right now. I'm not into my lecture. I'm just kind of remembering these days, and so that you understand some of the history of this great university. Chosic was converted to the gospel by one Truman Madsen, who was, probably still to this day the greatest lecturer person in the history of the church on the prophet Joseph Smith and the life of Jesus Christ. Brother Madsen passed away about a little over a year ago, and I was with his dear wife Ann just the other evening, and we reflected on Truman's life. But Truman brought Kresimer Chosic into the church, and so he became this member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, living in the Czech Republic, doing unbelievable missionary work over there, and helped really get the church into that part of the world. He became the head basketball coach for the Czechoslovakian, the Yugoslavian Olympic team 2 times over, and I think they took second and third in the world a couple of times. He died prematurely in his mid-40s, which was, quite the shock. And but if you look up Chosic, C-O-S-I-C, right, Kresimer Chosic, you can learn a lot about that guy's history. And so that was my era. In fact, I was the reason I'm kind of close to that whole thing is I was a yell leader, among other things, at BYU. I was a pretty good athlete in high school and played basketball and football and track, and I came down here to BYU, and you can tell I'm kind of short of stature, so it's a little difficult to make the BYU teams, but I wanted a front row seat at all the ball games. So, hey, the yell leaders have a front row seat, so I saw a sign up one day that said, hey, cheerleading tryouts or something like that, so I figured my voice projects pretty well, so I'm going to go out and I'll do that, and I became a yell leader and did that a couple of times, so I became close to the sports programs. On to law school, and then I moved to Southern California in 1977 when we graduated from law school, and we'll talk a little bit about that law school graduation and so forth in a couple of minutes. But so we moved down there in 1977, and we were in Southern California from 1977 to 1985. In 1980, I'd been practicing law in a large law firm in Southern California for 3 years at that point, but I had this itch to be more intimately involved with the business of my clients that we were representing. And so I found a company by the name of Prime Computer, which was an emerging computer technology company in 1980. And I said, well, that's an industry that I want to get into. And so I went and I applied for the job as their regional legal counsel for that computer company. And, when I look back on my career, the last 31 years in the computer industry, I attribute much of my success in life to that one decision that I made to get involved in an industry that is a growth industry, and that applies to so many different marketplaces, So I'm always looking for, and I can talk to you about a book, a Bible that I live by a little bit in my business world called Blueprint to a Billion. But it's driving billion-dollar valuations for companies. How do you go about doing that? We can talk about that a little bit today. How long do I have today? When do you want me to wrap? 2:50, so 35 more minutes. Now, do we want to include time for Q&A, or are we going to do that later? We'll do that afterwards. Okay. And just to do a sanity check one more time, when will I be leaving here today? 3:30. So, yeah, I've got a flight, and I just want to make sure that... on to Austin, Texas tonight, back to Salt Lake City tomorrow night. I have a board meeting tomorrow night. I have a board meeting tomorrow morning, a board dinner tomorrow night, and then a board meeting on Friday morning. And then I don't know what Friday afternoon holds for me, but my admin will. And thank goodness she was able to grab these slides and shoot them to Josh. So let's see, where was I? 1980, got into the technology industry. So what I'm saying to you is, as you look at your lives and what is going to unfold over the next 30 years, make sure you find yourself in an industry that's growing, right? Absolutely essential for your success. Get some technical training. I can't emphasize that enough. I went through this with my sons, right, who are now in their mid-30s. One's a practicing lawyer in Salt Lake. The other works for the Office of Economic Development in Salt Lake City. Both have had reasonably successful careers, but I will tell you that they could have even done better had they had a year of computer programming or electrical engineering or something like that. So as you're getting that Master's of Accountancy degree or that degree in political science or what, add in some tech classes. I got to tell you, it is a difference maker. When I interview people, and I do it every day, I'm always wondering, okay, are they going to understand the technology, right? What basis do they have for understanding what we are doing in the marketplace? And so I always have those questions for people as they approach me for a job. Because I can have one lawyer here interviewing with me for a job and another lawyer here, and this one might have better academic credentials slightly, but if this person has a little technology experience and this person doesn't, I'm always going to opt for the person with the technology background. So, maybe some of you are too far into your careers to have to go back and take additional training in that area. And we all kind of grow up in this generation with a smartphone and an iPad and so forth. So are kind of tech savvy, but try to take it to another level to give yourself something to distinguish you in the marketplace. Does that make sense? I'm not seeing enough nods. So thank you very much. Okay, great. So today's lecture is on something I entitled How to Create a Billion-Dollar Network, right? And so I've been successful in my career to see two companies now reach $1 billion valuation where I was intimately involved with the company, and that was Novell. And people think of Novell today as, oh, that's the old campus in South Provo, et cetera, et cetera. But understand, in its heyday, Novell's market valuation, market cap, and you all know what the market caps are and how to create, valuations. Like you take the number of shares outstanding and you multiply it times current stock price, and that equals the market cap. So, for example, Fusionio, who's got their, who's online right now? Anyone online? Okay, green man, green and yellow, soccer man. Looks like you're from Scandinavia.
Utah Jazz.
Okay. Oh, and he's got a rugby T-shirt underneath or something like that, so it's very confusing. You're an ambivalent person. You're not sure whether you want to shoot hoops or tackle somebody. So if you go into Google and just put FIO stock price, FIO stock price, I'm actually curious what my Fusionio stock is trading at right now. Thank you, $26.73, $27 a share. And what is that equivalent to in terms of market cap? Does it show a market cap there?
2.4 billion.
2.4 billion? Okay. So that's pretty good. And you know how old Fusionio is? The company started 5 years ago. How do you freaking create a $1 billion valuation in 5 years? It's kind of astounding, seriously, when you think about it. And so, I was blessed in that process. If you go back in the history of Novell, Novell's largest market cap occurred roughly in 1991, 1992. Anyone have a guess of what Novell's market cap would have been in 1991 or 1992? Just give me some guesses. It's actually $8 billion. Actually, $8 billion. It was the second most valuable publicly traded software company in the world, behind Microsoft. Its market cap at one point exceeded the combined market capitalization of United Airlines, American Airlines, and Delta Airlines, all combined. So one little software company in South Provo. So if anyone says that this state doesn't have a great legacy of technology and remarkable achievement in that realm, they're sadly mistaken. We have a great heritage in this state of technology. So we talked a little bit about market caps. Sad thing is, in the last 11 years, I don't want to say it, but since Eric Schmidt and I left Novell, the company's market cap eventually dwindled down to roughly around $1 billion is what they eventually sold out for. And so there's a little bit of a sad last 11 years at the company and so forth. But this is what happens. You want to get in. Never get too greedy, by the way, in terms of stock. You see your stock running up, at some point you'll get stock options. You're never going to get rich working for a service-oriented. If you're an accountant, right, you have to bill yourself out per hour. If you're a lawyer, you have to bill yourself out per hour. No, get involved in a company that has stock and stock options and secure those stock options, because you never know what's going to happen to that company. If you're in the right company, in the right market, et cetera, you're going to see stock valuations. So that really helps supplement and will build up your equity over lifetime, so forth. So we talked a little bit about $1 billion. So Novell reached an $8 billion market cap. I was on the original advisory board for Omniture. It was originally called mycomputer.com with Josh James and John Pastano. They asked me to help them out early on a little bit, and they were good to me. And we were thrilled to see what happened to that company, and they created a wonderful success there. And I think they eventually sold to Adobe for, I want to say, just over $2 billion. Was it? 1.8 billion? Okay. By the way, if Fusionio, there was a rumor, that was going around last week that Intel was going to buy them and so forth. You'd be looking at probably a $3.5 to $4 billion exit on that one at Fusionio. Does anyone know what Fusionio does, by the way? So let me explain a little bit why that is so remarkable, because it would help give you some context for this company. Fusionio makes what has been described as the world's fastest data storage device. So if you walked into a corporate data center here at BYU, what you would see is racks and racks of black boxes. What's inside those black boxes? Well, there are a lot of servers, and there's a lot of hard disk storage, right? Spinning disks. So for the last 25 to 30 years, what has dominated data storage in America are those spinning disk drives sold by companies like EMC, et cetera. And so, but hard disk drives still have spinning parts into them. They're governed by Newtonian laws of physics, right? As opposed to what Fusionio makes, which is if you will, a disk drive that is based solely on flash memory. So who has a jump drive on them? Okay, you got a jump drive. Looks like that. How many gigs do you have on it? 4 gigs on your little flash drive, okay? So what Fusionio makes is, think of maybe 500 jump drives compressed into a single device about this big, right? And it goes back into servers, and so you could eliminate literally 1,000 disk drives, right? These big spinning, humongous things. You can eliminate 1,000 of those with one single Fusionio flash-based memory device. It's kind of crazy when you think about the miniaturization of data centers. I think data centers take up 2 to 3% of the world's power structure, the power grid. Just, they suck power, and you need big cooling devices, et cetera, to cool down these hard disk drives that are spinning. Well, we can replace so much of the data center at Facebook, Apple, et cetera, are big customers of Fusionio with our flash-based memory devices. Now, we won't displace all hard disk drive technology, at least today, because hard drives are still really cheap. You can go buy, I don't know, 1 trillion bytes of information, a terabyte drive for what? $79.95, $99.95, cheap, right, at Costco. So if all you care about is storing the data, you can still get by with hard drives. But if you actually want to do something with that data on a repeated and fast basis, you're going to be moving to flash-based memory devices over time. And that's why Fusionio has such a resonance in the market right now. People are way excited about it. So I became CEO of Fusionio in 2008, 2009, early 2009, and ran the company and for a period of time. And there was a great founder of that company, a fellow by the name of David Flynn. In fact, you should have David come lecture, because now he's CEO, and he stepped into my shoes as we were taking the company public. He always wanted his bite at the CEO apple, and he deserves it. He's a brilliant technologist, Bill Gates-like, really, in his knowledge of IT and so forth. What I did and how we helped create $1 billion plus valuation for that company was putting together a management team that really is second to none, really in the computer industry today. I hired Steve Wozniak, was one of my first job offers that I made. Who's heard of Steve Wozniak? Okay. Some people have said that may be the greatest hire in the history of the computer industry. As crazy as it sounds, you have this icon that invented the Apple computer along with Steve Jobs. And here he came to work for a little Utah-based company as our chief scientist at Fusionio. It's like, really? How did that happen? Well, in creating $1 billion network, I'll remind me to tell you the story of how that happened a little bit, because it'll help you to understand how you create valuations. You'll hear me say frequently, it's not the what, but the who. Now, you want to write that one down. It's not the what, but the who. So when you create a company, what is really important about that company is it's not so much what matters in terms of the technology, the what, if you will, as to whom you put around it, right? As Colin says in his books, Good to Great and so forth and so on, he says you got to get the right people on the bus, right? And that's what we did at Fusionio. I came into a situation of chaos. The former CEO at that time, things didn't work out for a variety of reasons there. And so they were left in kind of a desperate strait. We need to go out and hire a finance guy, a chief of sales. We had a good marketing guy, so forth. But we had to build a team around that technology. Had we not done that, that company would have just been another one in the annals of the computer industry that was interesting but kind of never made it. You've got to put the right team around it in order to create a successful company and organization to succeed in creating these billion-dollar valuations. So Fusionio went public in June of last year. So been public for 8 months or so, and as you can see, is doing quite well on the New York Stock Exchange. It was fun being back there last June to help ring the bell and set that company up onto its course for the future. But about a year ago, as I transitioned out of Fusionio in terms of an active day-to-day role, and Flynn came on and did more of the CEO thing, it gave me an opportunity to look at some other deals in the state. And honestly, I probably looked at 100 different companies in the state of Utah. I get probably a deal a day that comes my way. Hey, Dave, you know, I've got this great new technology. Can you come analyze it for me and, you know, maybe sit on our advisory board or invest in our company and so forth. So I see a lot of those. So I see a lot of companies. But in Hirevue, I found a company that kind of matched my passion for human talent with the trends that I'm seeing in the industry today. Always be looking for trends and get involved in a company that is involved in those trends, if you will. Today, in the computer industry, world of information technology, you see several trends that attracted me to Hirevue. Let me just cite a couple off the top of my head. Video cameras, right? So, right? 3 years ago, we all walked around like this doing video, right? Today, we all walk around like this doing video, right? And so you've got probably, I think I read the other day that 40 to 45% of people that used to have, you know, handheld video cameras have now gone to, you know, their smartphone, and it's displaced that. And so you see the pervasiveness, the ubiquity of webcams and video cameras throughout. You cannot buy a laptop today. Glad to see you've got your little Macintosh there. Steve Wozniak would be pleased. Without a built-in video camera, right? And all of your handheld smartphone devices, they all come with video cameras these days. And so that's kind of been a pervasive trend out there over the last 2 to 3 years. The second trend that you see a lot of in our industry is the need to do more with less. And so Hirevue does miraculous things for the interviewing process. We eliminate millions of dollars in costs. So let me tell you a little bit about what Hirevue does so you get a better sense of that. So say you're a vice president of engineering at Microsoft in Redmond, Washington, and you need to hire 200 engineers over the next month or two. And Steve Ballmer, the CEO of Microsoft, is down your throat. Hire, hire, hire. You've got some recruiters back there trying to look at resumes and so forth. And they go out to monster.com and so forth and so on. They register on LinkedIn and they see a bunch of resumes that came in. And so let's say for one requisition, you would typically have, I don't know, 15 to 20 to 30 resumes, depending on the job that you're trying to fill. Now, with Hirevue's technology, instead of having to go through those 20 or 25 resumes and going, okay, these 3 look the best, let's bring in these 3 people for interviewing, right? Instead of doing that, you're able to send quick little video links out to say maybe your top 12 or 15 engineering candidates with a thing that says, and it's all Microsoft web-based and with their branding on it. Microsoft, by the way, is not a customer, but Nike, Starbucks, Accenture, Walmart, they're all customers of Hirevue. And so you would see a branded page that would come to you that would say, what's your first name? Neil. Dear Neil, you got the interview. Click here to learn more. And so it would be an email from Nike. Neil would click on that icon, and it would take him to a page that would say, Neil, you got the interview. And then you would probably see an introductory video from someone like Phil Knight of Nike. And he would come on and say, hey, welcome to the Nike organization. This is the world's greatest place to work, et cetera, et cetera. We appreciate you taking the time to do an interview with us today. Click here, and the next steps will be shown you. And so you just click next, and it would fast forward to you. And suddenly you would see your face pop up in your video camera, your webcam. And it would get you centered, make sure the lighting's right, make sure the sound is right. And then you would go through and answer a series of questions. Now what's great about this is Neil can do this on his own time. He doesn't have to sneak around his current employer. Let's say he's working for Adidas, right? And now he wants, an opportunity at Nike, and Nike's actively recruiting people out of Adidas. And so now he doesn't have to sneak around Adidas all day. He can go home at night, put the kids to bed, and do his webcam interview from the comfort of his own home. So it saves him time. And oh, by the way, Nike doesn't have to fly him out to Beaverton, Oregon to come meet with them, right? So now remember what I said about those 20, 25 resumes that you get. Now, let's say you filter it down to your top 12 or 15 candidates. That's when you would send the Hirevue link out to these people. So you don't have to fly them to Beaverton. You don't have to narrow your field down to maybe your 3 top candidates and fly them in. You can see them perform. And so when Neil goes into the system, he'll, on the first question, he'll click on that. Once he's done a practice question and he's comfortable in front of the camera, then an icon will come up and say, your first question is, and then it'll say, tell us a little bit about your background. Now, the company, of course, can customize those 8, 10, 15, 20 questions in any way that they want, right? Typically, I've seen ranges from 6 to 12 questions that companies will send out to try to get a feel for these people. Now, the great thing about this is Nike is now going to see actual video interaction of 15 people rather than bringing in 2 or 3 to Beaverton, Oregon. And oh, by the way, when they've flown them across the country to come interview at Nike, invariably, and this happens all the time, you get in the interview, and in the first minute or two, you as the hiring manager know, this person's not going to be a cultural fit. This isn't going to work out. And yet, you've set and arranged a bunch of meetings throughout the rest of the day for the person to go meet with Manager X and Manager Y and so forth and so on. And you're not going to say, well, bye-bye, it was, you know. So you go through, you spend your hour, you interview them, you send them on down the line, even though you know you'll never hire that person again. With Hirevue, we're able to allow you to pre-screen, evaluate, and rate those potential candidates before they ever come in. So it's really a great tool that saves company lots of time and so forth. Are there any questions around that? Is that helpful to understand? And you can do that on demand. We also have a live capability. So if Neil wants to do a live interview now with 3 managers at Nike, they can get on the line, kind of like a Skype call. But the great thing about this is it's all recorded. It can be shared with other members of the management team. You as a company are now creating a great pool of video talent that you have to call on and say, let's say Neil doesn't pass the muster, and yet he got a pretty high rating. But for this particular job, you know, and typically the ratings are 1 to 5, 5 being the best. Let's say he rated a 4.2. But there was a 4.3 that was a little bit better, and people liked him a little bit better for some reason. Or his experience didn't really fit precisely with the job, and this other person did. So the other person got the job. But the company still has his video and can go back through meta tags and so forth and, you know, refine Neil and, you know, redeploy that video asset, if you will, to offer Neil another job in their organization. So that can save company millions of dollars. Walmart did this for their campus recruiting. So rather than, you know, have them fly to a university, they would have, they actually created a studio where the campus recruiting event would take place. The people would come on campus to do their video interviewing, and they had little booths that the people would walk in. They would do their 8-question interviews. That would immediately go back to Walmart in Bentonville. And then the people in Bentonville were looking at these video interviews live and so forth. And so they would take that data and they would send a note back to the person that actually was doing the on-campus recruiting, say it was just one single individual, and hire Neil, hire Bob, et cetera, right then and there on the spot. So that information could all get conveyed back to a corporate headquarters. Well, that's a little bit about what Hirevue does. And I believe it's going to have a $1 billion valuation one day. The company is, you know, small at this point. We have roughly 40 to 45 employees. But revenues are ramping, probably grew roughly 300% last year. And the sky's the limit for this company. Are any of you familiar with Taleo or SuccessFactors or any of these other? Taleo just sold to Oracle for $1.9 billion. And all they create is an applicant tracking system. They've digitized, automated applicant tracking. Great. We're integrated with Taleo, by the way. But they created nearly a $2 billion valuation for a company. And then you have SuccessFactors, and they've done the same thing in performance management. Anyway, that's what Hirevue does. Great company, etc. But I came to talk to you about how to create a billion-dollar network, and I apologize that it took so long to get to this. So the first principle you want to remember, and now I'm looking at the clock, and we've only got 10 minutes, and I don't know how I got going this long. But first and foremost, in your lives, remember this principle. Give with no thought of getting. I went to the birth of my daughter's baby, Moti, in the fall of 2007. The doctor said, Dave, can I take you to breakfast? After the baby was born and all cleaned up. And he says, I'd like to take you to breakfast. Go to breakfast with this guy. I don't know why he wants to take me to breakfast. About halfway through the breakfast, he says to me, Dave, can you meet my son, Brian Lebrecht? Not my son, my son-in-law. He lives in Southern California. He's moving to Utah, and he needs a job. And I know you're very well connected here in the state of Utah, and maybe you can find him a legal position. I said, sure, I'll go to lunch with Brian. We can talk about some things, et cetera, et cetera. Now, I didn't have to go to lunch with Brian. It would have been very easy for me to say, no, I'm too busy. I'm doing the CEO thing, et cetera, et cetera. But I went to lunch with Brian. Now, no, I'm going to eventually get to the end of the story, and due to the time constraints we have today, I'm going to get to the end of the story right now. The end of the story is that as a direct result of my agreeing to go to breakfast with Dr. Judd and then agreeing to go to lunch with his son-in-law, Brian Lebrecht, I hired Steve Wozniak. Now, you have to get through about 4, 5, 6 eventual chains to get to where I hired Woz. But the quick part of the story is, Brian, I go to lunch with Brian. I tell him, get involved, get network. He joins the Utah Bar Association. He calls me a couple of months later. He says, Dave, I took your advice. I got involved in the Utah Bar Association. I'm now chairman of the Speakers Bureau. Will you come give a speech for us? I said, sure, Brian. Where is it? Sun Valley, Idaho. What? Sun Valley, Idaho. I live in Provo, Utah. How do you get there? Well, it's about a 5 or 6 hour drive. Brian, whatever. I can't do it. That's too much. He says, no, we really need, okay, I'll go. So I drive my car up 5, 6 hours, Sun Valley, Idaho, get to Sun Valley, Idaho, give my speech, about a group like this, have a good time, finish the speech. I'm walking out of the room, and I see a little piece of paper on this thing, and it says, Utah Bar Association, annual meeting, keynote speaker, Steve Wozniak. Well, hey, I'm going to hang around. I'm going to see what the Woz has to say. So I go, and by the way, sit in the front row. Neil sat in the front row today, so I've called him on a couple of times. John's is sitting in the front row. It's a good thing to sit in the front row because you never know what good can come from it. I went down, I sat in the front row to hear Wozniak speak. And oh, by the way, I sat right next to a lovely young lady. No, not you. You. Dark hair like yours. What's your name? Oh, shoot. I was hoping you were going to say Julie. Her name was... Your mom's name's Julie? Oh, that's what I was thinking of. Yeah. I'm one of those psychic guys. Right? Yes, it was in my mind. Anyway, Julie Roebuck. I said, Julie, nice to meet you. She said, what are you doing? I told her a little bit about myself. And she says, oh, I want to introduce you to my boss. I says, who's your boss? Steve Wozniak. She was there accompanying Steve Wozniak to the event. She was his executive assistant. So long story short, I then talked to Woz, and everything took off from there. But again, was I going to get anything from, going to breakfast with Dr. Judd or going to lunch with the son? No, I just did it, right? You never know what's going to happen. I've got another great story. I can't resist telling this one. I went to lunch last spring about a year ago with an out-of-work salesperson. I won't give you his name. But I'd known him 20 years earlier in the computer industry. He emails me, he says, Dave, can I take you to lunch? I've lost my job, got laid off, I'm looking for my next gig. Okay, I'll go to lunch with you. So I go to lunch with the guy. Long story short, he gets a job because I refer him to a CEO who hires him in his organization. But you know what I got out of it? I got $5 million out of that lunch. How did that happen? I was raising a fund along with Dave Checketts. Who's heard of Dave Checketts? Okay, former owner of the president of the Utah Jazz, became president of the New York Knicks, Madison Square Garden, etc. Fine LDS guy. You need to have him lecture here. He's a fantastic guy. Anyway, so Dave and I last spring were raising a $250 million sports fund. And so as I was walking out of my lunch with this out-of-work sales rep, he says, oh, by the way, is there anything that I can do for you, Dave? Thank you for the referrals. I'd given him 3 names of CEOs to contact, et cetera. And he said, is there anything that I can do for you? I says, I'm raising a $250 million fund to invest in professional sports franchises around the globe. I don't know if you know anybody. He says, you know what? A couple of years ago, I was in Saudi Arabia doing some work, and I met a Saudi prince. And I went, wow. And he says, and you know what? He lives in Beverly Hills, and he loves sports. 2 days later, I was on a plane to Beverly Hills and met with the Saudi prince, raised $5 million from that guy. So, give with no thought of getting. It happens. I'm telling you, it works. Show up. Okay, so great example. 90% of success in life is showing up. You've shown up here today. You probably had other things you could have been doing. It's a beautiful day. You could be out playing some golf. You could be out doing some other things. You showed up. Maybe you'll pick up a nugget here today as a result of listening to my ramblings, if you will. But you got to show up. Sometimes it's tough. We got church obligations. We got business obligations, et cetera, et cetera. Last night, the last thing I wanted to do last night is show up at a political fundraiser. Now, if you learn anything about me, and by the way, everybody in this room, I expect to have a LinkedIn request from you tonight. dbradfordvc@yahoo.com. That's my email address. dbradford, V as in Victor, C as in Charlie, @yahoo.com. Find me on LinkedIn. Send me a LinkedIn request. Connect with people that are successful in life. It helps. Last thing I wanted to do last night was to stop in at a political fundraiser. One thing you'll know about me is I've raised a lot of money for Mitt Romney. I'm on his National Campaign Finance Committee. But that aside, Jason Chaffetz had asked me to stop in at a political fundraiser last night. I was absolutely exhausted. I've been going like 24/7 trying to build up Hirevue. But I showed up last night. I don't know what's going to happen from that. I got 3 business cards from that, handed out things for Hirevue, etc. Gave Jason a little money, etc. But I'm telling you, when you show up and you interact with people, don't do it in a forced way, but just be curious. Just be curious about other people. It's not one of my 6 principles. Maybe make it your 7th principle. Be curious. Like, where are you from, black shirt guy? Ogden, Utah. What do your parents do? John Deere. What do they do for John Deere? Your dad works for John Deere?
He's a manager.
Manager, customer support. Great. John Deere is a big corporation, isn't it? Where are their headquarters? Moline, Illinois. And I will bet that John Deere has hiring needs. And I will tell you what I want you to do after this event. You don't really have to do this. But if you want to introduce me to your dad via email, that would be great. And I'm going to simply give him the little Hirevue pitch. And as a direct result, maybe he'll introduce me to your Vice President of Human Resources back in Moline. Right? So things can happen when you start. And you know what? I'm genuinely interested in this guy. I mean, what's your passion in life?
Well, I have a lot.
Okay? Give me one.
Graphic design.
Love it. Okay, you got a job with my wife. My wife's building a great technology company. She needs graphic designers. You may have a job with her, etc. So I'm serious about that. Get involved in people's lives. Ask them questions. Be curious when you show up, right? And by the way, it's not the number of cards you pass out at an event that's important. It's the number of cards that you collect. Because once you collect someone's card and contact information, then you hold the power, if you will. You're able to contact them again. Get those cards and put them into an organized database, and follow up immediately. What's going to happen is he's going to send me an email tonight, if he's smart. And it's going to say, Dave, it was great meeting you today. Thanks for the lecture. And personalize it. And now I will remember him from John Deere. My dad is the guy that works at John Deere, et cetera, et cetera. Now, if he waited a week, I would not remember that he was wearing a black shirt with white stripes, with little strings down it. I wouldn't remember he's a blonde-haired guy from Ogden, Utah. I would have completely forgotten all of that. Tonight, I'll remember it. In a week, I won't know it. Follow up immediately and do it in a personal way that is meaningful to the people. I'm going to run out of time here. The fourth principle of networking is to absolutely stay in touch over time. I've got a million stories about staying in touch over time. If you stay and ask me questions about that, I'll tell you how I hired my Senior Vice President of Global Sales for Fusionio because I'd stayed in touch, and how I hired my Chief Financial Officer at Fusionio because I'd stayed in touch over time. That we have miraculous technology these days in the form of social media that allows us to stay in touch in a meaningful way. Be credible. Listen, never do anything in your life that's ever going to destroy your reputation. Once you do a bad act, once you get involved in one single company that ends up badly, that reputation will attach to you and be with you throughout the rest of your life. Now, there are ways to dissipate that, and there's the ways to rebuild your image on the web and so forth and so on. But there's this siren song that sings out to all members of the LDS faith, if you will. You can be successful in life. And oh, by the way, if I read the words from, not Isaiah, from Malachi, right? If I am faithful and I pay my tithes, what's going to happen? The windows of heaven will be opened unto me. Oh my gosh, money, gold, it's going to come my way. Well, no. He's talking about spiritual blessings, right, in the eternities, etc. And so we sometimes get sucked in by the siren song of, there's a business opportunity that's in front of us. If it just doesn't sound right, if it sounds too good to be true, it is, and run the other way. Maintain your credibility, your long-term credibility. And this, anyway, talking more. And finally, my last point is to work hard. Organizing a network that is successful takes a lot of hard work. I will pick up some cards here today. I will go home tonight. I'll be in Austin actually tonight. I'll go on my computer. I'll have 4 or 5 business cards that I will have gotten to this, and I will send LinkedIn requests, right? It takes work, right? I'd rather be watching the ball game. I'd rather be doing other things, right? But if you will take the time to organize it, how many people have 5,000 friends on Facebook? Oh my gosh. You guys need to step it up. Catch up with me. I have 5,000 friends on Facebook. Okay. Do you know that every one of those 5,000 Facebook friends is organized into a group? So if you connect with me, what's your passion in life?
Planning events.
Event planning. Okay, marketing. So he connects with me on Facebook. I learn a little bit about him. I go, oh, okay, cool. He's into event planning. I'm putting him in my marketing category. So everybody in my Facebook is categorized into a category. I do that with my Yahoo, right? And so forth. I've got 6,800 direct connections on LinkedIn or thereabouts. And those are organized. Now, actually, LinkedIn helps me organize those quite efficiently. It takes hard work and time. You can pay me now or pay me later, in a sense. That was an old Fram oil filter commercial. You can pay me now or pay me later. In other words, you can spend the $11.95 now to get a good oil filter, or pay me $1,200 later because your engine blew up, right? And so the point is, if you'll take the time now when you're 24, 22, 26 years old in life and organize those networks, next time, and by the way, remind me to tell you how I connected with Dave Checketts and the Sports Fund, because it goes directly to how I organize my networks and so forth. You've got to organize those networks. You'll be successful. Thank you very much. That'll do it for now.